On the internet, it's entertaining. Convincing them of ideas that you perhaps don't agree with. I've seen it myself on YouTube. I've seen a guy in America driving his car and his kids were in the back seat and he was arguing with them about an issue. And they was like, where did you hear that? School? He's like, why did the school tell you that? That's not true. And his own children are arguing with him because they learned it in school. Have you ever tried to take your children out of school? You'll get fined. You'll get in trouble. No, your kids have to go to school. Yeah. You have to give your kids away to the school. If you don't give your kids away to the brainwashing, you'll get in trouble. Yeah. And the reason they're doing this is because they want to control the youth, because the youth is, of course, the future of the world. And you have to understand that this whole idea of feminism, this is what I'm saying. You're saying women shouldn't vote. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we shouldn't allow children to be brainwashed. We shouldn't separate them from their parents to the point where they're going to absorb ideals. Like, and I've seen the Muslim community, the only ones standing at the gates of schools saying, you're not going to teach this to our kids. Absolutely. The only ones who will stand up against it. Because in the white Christian traditionalist of England, the British, they just sit there and let their children ship them off for programming. Yeah. Just ship them off for it's insanity. You don't raise your own kids anymore.
Absolutely. And you know what's so ironic about this is that if you read the 30 articles of the Human Rights Convention, I think it's number 27 or something like this, which says that a human being has a right to educate their children, or what their children is educated about. So on the one hand, they're saying, look, you can educate your child, you can choose what education they have. But on the other hand, no, it's the state, the Orwellian state, the thought police that must do that.
Correct.
So they've got a contradiction there. But what's even more pernicious, I think, as you said, is that this is a religion. I mean, at the end of the day, I think anthropologists, maybe 100 years from now, are going to look back in Western civilization and say, an individual with these traits is identifying in this way. This is a mythology of some sorts, a fiction of some sorts. Yeah. And this is a religion of the Western world. They sacrifice the conventional idea of one God creating the universe for this preposterous idea, or this mythological idea that you can identify as X and you're actually scientifically Y. And they're now trying to put this religion on our children. Now, you said it good in a video, because I actually saw a video that a small clip, like, a lot of your clips have become viral, like on Shorts and TikTok. And one of them was where you were saying that you can do what you want. I mean, in the West, just to be clear, I don't think either of us or any of us have said, no, we want to stop you from doing what you want. We're saying you can do what you want, and we're not stopping you from doing what you want. We're not trying to encroach on your rights. You live in the West, you have your rights. But what we're saying is that the red line is the children. Absolutely.
They need to understand anybody with any idea, and we don't have to talk about particularly sexuality because people get offended for it. Let's talk about something benign that makes it a lot harder for them to cut me up and misconstrue me like they always do. Let's talk about orange juice. If I don't like orange juice, and I've had children that I'm responsible for...
They'll still do it with orange juice.
Yeah, I know they will.
They'll say that he was analyzing...
Of course they will. I can't win. I can't win. But if I have children, and I raise them, and I'm responsible for them, and I decided to have them, and I sacrifice that for them, and I decide that I don't want them to drink orange juice, it's not fair for the government to come along and say, it doesn't matter what you want, we're going to force them to drink orange juice. And this is what they effectively do with so many of these ideologies. And you're right, it's to a degree, it's a religion. They are so fervent and so desperate for people to accept and believe in these things. This is why people say, oh, I'm an atheist. There's no such thing as an atheist. You either believe in God or you believe in the devil, and you believe in the degeneracy. There's no in between. I've never seen anybody who's an atheist who's genuinely just neutral to these things, right? They always end up agreeing with this craziness. I think the main reason people call themselves atheists is so they have an excuse to do bad things and not feel guilty about, what they know innately is wrong. But you're completely right. It's completely unfair for people of a certain ideology to come along and say that we must teach children my ideology regardless of what their parents believe and think. That's truly disgusting. And feminism and the whole idea of getting the mother out the household and locking the children in these educational camps is the reason they wanted to do all this stuff. And they want to control the youth, especially the youth, because children are the easiest to manipulate, to shape the future. And they're trying to shape the future of the children so that they are very good at ignoring their own innate moralities, and also very good at ignoring their own eyes. When you said earlier about X and Y, I perfectly understood you, and we're on YouTube, so we'll have to talk very carefully. But if you can convince somebody that a giraffe is a horse, and you can convince them that even if they look directly at a giraffe, that they know that their mind tells them it's a horse, regardless of the fact that they can see a giraffe before their very eyes, then they are completely open for all forms of slave programming. Once you get people to ignore their eyes, well, then the game is complete, right? So this is purposeful. This is done on purpose.
No doubt. I was doing at one point. I did a part of my postgraduate on gender studies, and I was speaking to this person on the lift, and she said that the penis is a social construct.
course it is.
So I said, okay, well, no problem then. On that logic, rape is a social construct.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's the same thing. If you take your belief to its logical conclusion, then it actually leads to things that you don't want to happen. For example, if you say that racism, so if I can identify as a black man or a white man or whatever, then racism becomes a social construct. So it's once again, if you take your ideas and stretch them out, you get exactly the opposite of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And I don't think this has been thought out properly.
But these people don't think, and this is what's amazing. It shows what privileged world we live in. They don't think, because their ideas, the reason they don't think is because their ideas aren't tested. When your ideas are tested and challenged, you have to find a way to rebut and prove your ideas to be true. The reason their ideas aren't tested is because of censorship. If you argue against these ideas, they delete the other side of the argument, which means we now live in a false version of reality because one side of the argument is completely decimated and deleted. Hence, the computers purport the matrix, and this is exactly where we are. If we could freely talk and argue against these points, they'd be gone. But we can't, which is why they still exist, which is why false ideas, which should have been destroyed long ago, are now pertinent amongst the population because of the matrix and their media machine and the false computer-generated reality we're forced to live under the guise of censorship. And this is what we say. I said this to somebody. They said, "Oh man, you lost your Instagram. That must suck." I'm like, "Yeah, okay, I lost Instagram. I can't show off my fancy cars. Cool." But it's not about that. This is about genuinely good versus evil. This is about the fact that if you read any history book, the people who did the censoring were never the good guys. This is genuinely about the forces of evil versus God. That's what this is about. It's not about my Instagram page. It's about the fact that there are ideas that they have now that we can't talk against. For the last 3 years, they had this thing we weren't allowed to talk against, and look what it did to people. Look how it decimated people, locking them in their houses, destroying people's businesses, etc. And guess what's going to come next? Another idea we're not allowed to talk against, and another one we're not allowed to talk against. And people think that anyone who's ignorant enough to sit there and trust the rulers of earth or their government and go, they're going to come up with ideas that I can't disagree with and nobody can disagree with, and those ideas are going to be good for me. Well, then you are a dummy, and you deserve what comes next.
I think the mask has dropped with your cancellation. Because at the end of the day, with your cancellations, it's as if they couldn't contain themselves. It was as if they made a mistake.
Yes, I would like to think that. I would like to think that we've now reached a critical mass, and I was perhaps the last person needed to truly show the agenda behind how these people work. I think it's a perfect storm of the fact that, one, the things I talk about, they proved me completely right. Two, I said I was going to be canceled. Three, they thought I was small enough to crush, and they've realized that my fans are loyal enough to follow me anywhere. So I become more popular post-cancellation, which also inspires people, right? I think the reason cancellation was such a powerful weapon is because if they cancel you, you're done. But once I prove that's not the case, then people are going to go, you know what, this is such an important issue, I'm going to tell the truth anyway, because if they cancel me, I won't be done.
I think with you it's a bit different because, I mean, you didn't have a company or a program that if you cancel, then you lose all your customers. You are the product yourself. I mean, they can't change your face or try and get rid of you.
Well, they can try and
maybe they will.
And that's the only thing I will say about being canceled. In terms of being canceled, I'm more popular than I've ever been. I've now moved over to Rumble, which is a YouTube competitor. Rumble.com/TateSpeech. You can speak with absolute freedom. It's just as good as YouTube. I encourage everybody, anyone with a YouTube account, you can go to Rumble.com. You can back up your entire account with a few clicks of a button. It will download all your videos, upload them all automatically. Get that done because YouTube will vanish you like this. So that's Rumble, where you can find me. But the only bad thing about being canceled is you have 3 strikes. First, they try and shut you up and lie about you and hope you'll be quiet. And if that doesn't happen, they try and put you in jail for something you didn't do. And if that doesn't work, they kill you. So when you lose your first strike, that is kind of scary. To know now that, okay, they've told me I must be quiet, and I'm not being quiet. So they're sitting around going, oh, Big Mouth still wants to talk. And they're coming up with a plan to try and make me be quiet. That is disconcerting. It is disconcerting.
I think this is very relevant to the Muslim community, bro, like in general, because the reason why I feel like this cancellation should be like such a concern for the Muslim community is because if this can be done to you because of XYZ view that you have, or that you had before Islam, let's say, a lot of those views were commensurate with Islam, fully commensurate with traditional Islam, especially your traditional views, gender roles, so congruent with it. Now, if they're allowing you to, if they're doing that with you, then we're next. Absolutely. And we've got 2 choices. Either we preempt the situation, like what we're doing right now, and holding these unelected elites to account, or we stay there as lame ducks and put our neck on the chopping board and we'll be next. Yeah,
absolutely. And this is why, once again, when I was saying earlier about the reason I've adopted Islam and how you have red lines and things you stand up for, It's the Islamic community are the only ones I see who are outside schools trying to protest and protect their own children. They're the only ones who have a baseline moral fiber that can't be corrupted. We're here in Dubai, right? You could walk outside and find a construction worker in the heat for $300 a month. If you offered him $1 million to denounce Islam, he wouldn't do it. He could not be bought.
And let me say something else as well on that. Do you know, we talk about hypergamy, which I agree. Almost all the studies, like this one by King and stuff like that, shows that hypergamy is a real thing, right? That women will marry, across and up dominance hierarchies. However, there's one thing I'll say about Muslim women, right? For the most part, and no study has been done on this, but from my own experience, I'll tell you this for a fact.
Yep.
You know? If you go to 100 Muslim women, 1,000 Muslim women, and tell them, look, you've got this millionaire, but he's not a Muslim. He wants to marry you.
Yep.
For the most part, I believe that they will reject that offer, which shows you a certain level of loyalty that we have as a community, that we have as Muslim people, which is inspired from the Quran, to be honest with you. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس. You are the best community that was sent from the people, and that the Prophet told us about these kinds of things. And it shows you, quite frankly, the strength of the Muslim community based on faith, a transcendental idea.
Yep.
And so that's one thing. One other thing I will say is, what you are, I consider you as a perpetual optimist. You're an optimistic person.
Yep. And
even post your cancellation, you can tell it did affect you. You're a human being.
Yep.
Bad things affected the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the Quran it says وَتَخْشَى النَّاسَ, and God is speaking to the Prophet and says, don't fear the people, fear me. And you fear the people, don't fear them, but fear me. These kinds of things. It did affect you as it would affect me, as it affect anyone. But what I continued seeing with you is reasons to make it good.
Yeah.
Perpetual optimism, and this is exactly Islam, because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, or it was said about him in a hadith, كَانَ يُعْجِبُهُ الْفَأْلِ. He used to love optimism. Optimism is an integral part of Islam. It's always finding a reason why this thing is good.
Yep.
And that is because at the end of it, what is it? You're either your sins are being deleted from the Islamic perspective. When you go through a trial or a tribulation, your sins are being deleted. You're going through a challenge. It's strengthening your iman, your faith, your person, or it's putting you in a higher rank in the hereafter. Yep. We believe obviously in heaven and hell. We believe in these things as real constructs. We don't believe in these things as metaphoric or something like that. So we believe that it's only good things, really, if you consider it. And so in many ways, one can see why a religion like that would suit someone like yourself. I mean, you mentioned Khabib Nurmagomedov before. Yeah. And you mentioned, he's got training, and then he's got praying and training and praying. And there's something else about Khabib which I think is really powerful, is that he represents, I think, a very virtuous thing, which is that he is both humble and confident. Yeah. And that's where the virtue is. And at the end of the day, if you have that kind of mindset, a strong mindset, a disciplinarian mindset for yourself and for your family, I think that is, in many ways, it is the remedy for a lot of these mental health issues.
Oh, absolutely. And I also think that God is pleased with you when you show him the beauty of his creation. I think that God is pleased with you when you work as hard as you possibly can and you do the best you can in anything you're going to attempt. God loves people who work hard and try hard. And in my own personal life, I can see that God is very happy with me when I give it 100%. And very few people give anything 100% anymore. Yeah. It's very rare you meet somebody and if they're honest with themselves and with you and with God, say, I gave it everything I had. They gave it some, they tried a bit, they got demotivated, they got distracted, they got tempted. But when you truly give your 100% to something, I think that makes God very happy with you. And I think he rewards us for that.
What would your advice be to somebody? Because this is one thing that you're credited with even by your enemies, right? Your detractors. They say that, you can say what you want about him. Even Piers Morgan said that, but you've given confidence to young men. Yep. There's a lot of young men now, young women, that require that discipline. What kind of advice would you give them, practical advice?
Yeah, I think that you have to live, there's a lot of practical advice I can give. In terms of the religious sense, I would say you need to live like God is always watching. You may have the opportunity to do something bad, or you may have the opportunity to steal some money or snake somebody, but in the end, you're going to pay for that, and the bill will be paid. Mm-hmm. I think if you do the right thing, in my experience, if you're a person who does the right thing, firm handshake, is on time, doesn't lie to anybody, does what he's supposed to do, is honest with a good heart, is genuinely polite to everyone he meets, if you are that person, you get very far in life. I've yet to meet people who just do all the simple things right, who completely fail at life. But I've met a lot of people who snake or steal some money and they get really rich, then they lose it all, or they get rich and end up a gambling addict or depressed or etc. So you have to just understand that God is always watching. He's going to reward you in the end. That's the first thing. And the second thing I will say is that you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and you need to curate your reality. I think the biggest problem with young people today is that they don't curate the realities heavily enough. The people that they want to spend most time with aren't adding any value to their lives, and then they end up wondering why they don't get anywhere.
It's so interesting. As you speak, it's as if you're narrating hadith, because it's when you said God is watching.
It sounds nicer in Arabic. When you say it in Arabic, it sounds. I need to learn that part.
No, honestly, there is a hadith that says that the highest form of faith is أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. That you should worship God as if He sees you, because if you don't see Him, He sees you.
Yeah.
And on the friends issue, there's a hadith on that as well. Like, that المرء على دين خليله, that the person is on the religion of his friends.
Yep.
So a lot of, like, as you say, this is
I need to learn it all. And this is, I'll say this now, the thing that was most daunting for me about converting was the amount I'd have to learn.
Yeah.
That's what's scary.
No, take it easy.
That's what's scary about it, But I mean, I'm a fast learner. I'm not a stupid guy, but it's just like, okay, I have a lot to do.
The Prophet Muhammad told us in hadith, inna ad-dina yusr, that the religion is easy. وَلَا يَشَدَّ الدِّينَ أَحَدٌ إِلَّا غَلَبَهُ. No one tries to overburden themselves with the religion except that it defeats them. In other words, take it incrementally. And Aisha, one of the wives of the Prophet, she said that if the first things that had been revealed to the people was this is permissible and this is impermissible, people wouldn't have done it.
Yes.
So, the first things that came down in terms of revelation were the verses of heaven and hell and these kinds of things. So I would say take it easy. It's a journey. It's like kickboxing,
Yep.
You probably came in when you were a young guy, learning the roundhouse. Of course. It took you some time to kind of develop competence in that field. And it's like anything else. So it's an easy process, but it's a gradual process. What I wanted to speak to you a little bit about is conceptions of masculinity.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think you've been criticized with that as well, like the toxic masculinity.
Supposedly, yeah. Which is such a vague term. It's almost like the community guidelines.
What do you think they mean by that?
Well, it's almost like the community guidelines of these social media companies, right? They give this stupid definition of a term, which basically can be applied to anybody and anything willy-nilly, deciding whether they like you or not. It's very vague. It's not solid. What they're trying to say is that you're overly masculine and that some of the traits which are innate inside of you as a man are somehow now bad for society or for other people, which is absolutely insane to even try and conceptualize, because it's asinine and it's childish, because like anyone with a brain understands that there are certain scenarios in life where particular qualities are completely applicable and permissible, and there's certain scenarios when they're not. To sit and say it's toxically masculine for men to be violent is stupid, because there are scenarios in life where you need a man to be violent. If someone breaks into your house, or if you go to war, or if you call a police officer. So it's not a matter of, a certain subset of masculine qualities being labeled negative, because these qualities exist because we've needed them for a very long time, and I argue we still need them today.
It's only when it interferes with their interest. Right?
And only when it interferes with their interest. It's kind of funny. I was arguing with a feminist, like I've done a bunch. And she was talking about toxic masculinity, and she was talking about the idea that men are innately violent and how that's bad. And I said, you think that's bad because you're living in an extremely privileged society and a very privileged life. But I'll tell you that that's not bad, because you, even in and of yourself, may not know this, but you like the idea of men being violent. Because let's say I lost my mind right now, or let's say an intruder broke in and threatened you physically.
Yeah, exactly.
You would call a man to be violent for you. You'd call the police and say, please be violent to protect me. You believe in violence very much. Yeah. So for you to sit there and say, oh, that violence is toxically masculine, but you call a toxically masculine man when the trouble comes, shows that the whole idea in and of itself is hypocritical and it's garbage and it's stupid. And what they're trying to do is brainwash people into thinking that if you stand up for yourself, or if you are true to the innate way we were built, the things that are inside of us when we're born, that there's something wrong with you. They want you confused. They want you to sit and go, I'm a man, and what's happening around me I think is unfair, and it makes me feel unhappy about it, and I want to stand up and talk and fight against it. They want to convince you that that's wrong and you're a bad person for wanting to defend your ideas. And I don't think that's the case. That's simply the absolute opposite, in fact.
Absolutely. And the thing is, a lot of people will think that, this idea of a man is just simply that our idea of a man, or the Islamic, say, for example, idea of a man is just this violent creature. The truth is, like you said, violence is just an integral part, or the ability, the capacity to do it in situations where there's a need for it, is just one part of the puzzle. Like, for example, you know, the Prophet Muhammad, one really interesting thing, we know he had 9 wives at one time, which is very difficult to make. You can probably...
bro, 9's
imagine
a lot.
9 at one
9's
time.
a lot.
And they're consistent relationships. It's not like divorce and marriage. It's like you're actually living with these. So 9 at one time. And then that's one thing. And then he had 6 children, all of which died in his lifetime. Wow. Only one of them survived afterwards. So he had to live with the grief of that. His wife died at his time as well. He had to live with the grief of that. He loved his first wife, Khadija, who was older than him. She died. And so he had to live with that grief. He had to live with the grief of his uncles. And so he dealt with that. We've got narrations of him crying when his son died. But what did he do? He didn't just, okay, cry and that's it, give up. He cried, and then he went to war the next day. He cried, then he went done a sermon the next day. He felt the grief, but then he could, he had 19 wars that he participated in. Wow. And it wasn't just, these are not wars that he told other people to do where he sat in some air-conditioned place. He went and actually involved himself in these wars. He was fighting, he nearly died in one of those wars, so he was engaging in war. He was the leader of a polity. He had 9 wives at one time, all managing all that. He prayed half of the night. So imagine, like you said, you sleep 4 or 5 hours. The Prophet Muhammad may have prayed for that long, like actually praying for that long. And that's an incredibly difficult thing to do. His children died. He was directing the people. I mean, if you really think about it from a KPI perspective, key performance indicators, for 1,400 years, people have been following the teachings of this man. From the most grandiose of things to the most minuscule of things. I mean, this is influence. And even Pantheon, I think, is one of the organizations that have ranked it. They've put him as number 1 because how could you not? How could you deny? His influence stretches cross-culturally, it stretches historically, and then also we got the Quran. They've got the hadiths. We've got thousands of hadiths. We've got the Quran. This is the role model for the Muslims. Do you see what I mean? And it's a lot of men nowadays, I'll be honest, within the Muslim community and outside the Muslim community, we don't have those kinds of role models. The religious clergy are nothing like warriors, and the warriors are nothing like intellectuals or anything like that. And I cannot remember who done this, who said this quote, but it was such a powerful one. It was an English.
It was either Aristotle or Socrates, I think, if it's the quote you're about to say.
No, let me say the quote first. He said something to the effect of, if you separate the fighting man from the thinking man, you have fools that fight, and you have cowards that think.
Yeah, completely. And I think it was there's a similar quote by either Socrates or Aristotle. Yeah, he said something very similar. He said, if your warriors and your thinking men are separate, then you nailed it.
Oh,
it's
right.
exactly the same. I think it's one of those two. But no, and you're completely right. It's completely true. And that is what the world is lacking now as a whole. And it's kind of insane when you look at how the world works. You have these thinkers sitting around in some government building sending warriors to die. And the warriors don't understand why. And the thinkers are too scared to go do it themselves. And it's kind of strange how whole society's even, limping along as it is. But I agree with you. I think that's the essence of a complete man. And when you were telling me about the adversaries, the adversities that were faced and how he stood up and he fought against them and moved forward anyway. I think this is what God wants from us, from all of us. It doesn't matter what the adversary is. It doesn't matter how much you're hurt by it. You need to allow it to motivate you to push harder and show your power and show your resilience. And it's almost like, even before I became Islamic, I very much understood that when bad things happen to me, this is a lesson from the universe or from God or from the Creator to stand up and show who I am and who I can be, and to take all of the pain and anguish and disappointment and heartbreak and all of this and turn it into a force I can use for good and to make myself a better person. And I think if you don't approach life this way, that you're always going to struggle, because life is hard for everybody. It's going to be hard. It doesn't matter who you are or what you do. You need to be resilient to it. And I think that Islam is a fantastic way to understand exactly how to handle adversities and move forward. So,
well, I'm going to end in a second, but I just want to say one thing, which is that for those who don't know what Islam is a very, very basic religion, and it really is just a belief and worship in one God worthy of worship. As we've talked about today, it's not your desires, it's not the society, it's not the matrix or the LWO, the liberal world order. It's not any of those things. Really, it's just belief and worship in one God, and it is the belief in all of the messengers, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and we believe the final messenger is Prophet Muhammad, who I've just described a second ago. And if someone just believes in those two things, actually, for all intents and purposes, they're a Muslim, and then all they have to do next is start praying 5 times a day, which is what Andrew Tate has done. It's been a pleasure having you on. I know you're a bit tired and fatigued, so I don't want to
good.
make it all long for you, and we'll get something to eat after this. I don't know how long we've been talking for. How long have we been speaking for? I think that's a good time.
Yeah,
I think
and we can do another one as well, especially as
Sure.
my journey continues and as I learn more and as I get more knowledgeable. I would love in you know, a year or so or 6, 7 months, etc., would meet up again and do something.
Absolutely. And if you need anything from us, obviously, we're always being in communication with you. If you need resources, research, anything like that.
Perfect.
And you're part of the community. And one thing I want to say to the Muslim people is we must show loyalty and unity with Andrew Tate in the sense that he is now one of our brothers. And it is absolutely unforgivable to say things that some of these feminist Muslims have been saying. And in fact, if anything, they need to be the ones who are refuted. Andrew Tate now is a brother of ours. His sins have been completely wiped away. And that really is that. Thank you so much, Andrew, for coming.
Thank you very much, man. And it's been educational and very interesting. Thank you, my friend.
Too, man.
Thank you,
so
brother.
much. Take care, man.